Hello, and welcome to the first development log for a game I'm designing called Intelligent Design. So I've been working on this for a while, and I thought it was about time I made a video where I talked through exactly what my aims are with the game, how the game is going to be to play, that kind of stuff. So I'll probably do these once every couple of weeks. This one will be a bit longer because it's the first, and I want to explain everything that I've got working in the current build. So, in Intelligent Design, you are controlling a drone. You'll eventually see the shadow at some point. You're an employee of a company, and your job is to terraform a planet. You don't really know why you're doing it. It's something that over the course of the game you'll start to learn why you're doing this and learn things about the company that you're working for. And underlying that kind of gameplay is a simulation, a ecology simulation, where there are food chains, there is evolution, and it's all happening, and you're trying to balance that. So if I start by showing you some of the different buildings you're going to be able to build. This here is what I'm calling a radar tower, and what it does is you can only place buildings within a certain range of this building, so it kind of stops you just going out and building anywhere to begin with. The second building that you can make is a collector, and this is going to be kind of like a structure where you get resources from. If you look in the top right of the screen, there's a thing called biomass, and you can think of biomass as kind of like health of all the creatures in the world, and that's your currency, and so you harvest that from the world just like your creatures do. And so the more you're sucking out of the world, the less that your plants can suck out of the world. So you've got to kind of balance you taking this and there being enough left for your plants. So let's have a look at plants to start with. Actually, what I'm going to do at this point is I've got a saved game. I'm going to load that. I just want to show you what it looks like at the start, which is this kind of barren planet. So I'm going to load my previous save. Okay, so plants. These here are plants, and they behave a lot like you'd expect normal plants to behave. They grow, they give off seeds, they take in like nutrients and resources from their surroundings, and they compete with each other. So these plants here are competing for the same resources, and depending on the genetics of this plant, so many of these plants will be able to survive in an area at one time. You can see that the colour of what I've got here is 4 different species of plants, and they're different colours and they behave in different ways, and you can see that by how they've spread. Things like the way their seeds work is different depending on their genes. Different plants will like throw seeds into the air, some plants will just drop them beside them. As well as the kind of nature model here, the entire game has a climate model, so you can hear the wind. That's changing. That is something. There is a climate model in the game, so depending on the wind, the seeds will travel further or not as far. There's also this concept of, in my previous games it was rainfall. In this game it's more of like a mist. You can actually see it if you look carefully. Depending on how much moisture there is in the air, there's more kind of extra resources for these plants to get. So in a drought, certain plants won't be able to survive, depending on how they've evolved. So this game that I've loaded here is probably about 10-20 minutes into the game, probably actually about 10 minutes. And if you look in the top right, you're going to have 3 different levels. A level for your plants, a level for your herbivores, and a level for your carnivores. And those numbers underneath, which are kind of like XP, are actually how many plants or herbivores or carnivores were born in your world. So normally you would request like a random plant species, and seeds would just appear. I'm going to have some animation where some ship comes in and drops them in, and those seeds fall to the ground and they create new plants. Those themselves don't give you experience. What gives you experience are new births. So you can see in this world, we've already started. We're on level 2. A whole bunch of another generation of plants have appeared. You can actually see here that this one is younger, it's shorter. Also you can see over here this one has got more children, so you've got the larger ones are going to be the parents. So these plants are starting to become established, so it's time we can spawn some herbivores. So I'm going to request, I'm going to do 3, let's say 4 sets of herbivores. Now, all the creatures in this game are born from eggs. And the way that, in this case, these eggs, because I've spawned a new species, they are fertilized already. But actually in the game, the herbivores and carnivores, they're a male and female, and the females will lay eggs, and these need to be fertilized by the males. And so that's how the reproduction happens. And they're not necessarily, like, I'm saying they're different species, but they can breed interspecially. So if this pink, slightly smaller creature here laid an egg, then any of the others could fertilize that egg, and there would be genetic crossover. And so what kind of genes do these things, what behaviors do these herbivores have? So their genes will affect things like their field of vision, their sense of smell, how far away from each other they like to go, how far they'll travel from the last place they had a meal, that kind of thing. So there's probably about 10 genes for the herbivore. The plants have slightly less and the carnivore slightly more. And it results in this huge variation of behavior. And that's what I think is going to be interesting about the game, is eventually, as you level up things like your herbivore level, your plant level, you're going to be able to design creatures yourself using like genetic engineering. You'll unlock the access to be able to actually look at this creature and say what genes does it have, and you will have to work out what each of the genes does. I'm not going to tell you that's going to be something you have to experiment with. So okay, we've got some herbivores, and if you look, we've got some more plants of just some seeds that sprouted. Incidentally, in the night, when it's nighttime, plants don't grow. So the darkness does have an effect on the environment as well. So you can see there's a baby creature just was born. Now these creatures, this is random. This is like this demo is, all of these things are completely random, and the frequency at which they have eggs is another gene. So it just so happens that 2 of the herbivore species reproduce quite quickly, which is going to be bad news for our plants. If you look in the top left, our population, we've got the same number of herbivores as plants, and the herbivores eat these plants. So to try and balance it out, I'm going to spawn some carnivores. So I'm going to do 3 again, because actually I think I actually want to wipe out a lot of these herbivores. So carnivores behave in a similar way. You can see their eggs look slightly different. I might change this in the final game, but this is just a starting point. So while these gestate, or gestation, I don't know, while they wait to be born, I'm going to show you something else. Eventually, you're going to be able to unlock an ability where these radars, you can actually turn them into, you can actually put barriers around them. I might change this texture, but you might want to do that so as I was saying, here's some carnivores. Look, so I'll go back to talking about the barrier in a minute, but so the carnivores, they actually need to eat the herbivores. And the herbivores will obviously try and escape, and so you end up getting these kind of behaviors here, where they're chasing the herbivores. But something else, which the way I've designed the behavior of these carnivores is that they can actually learn to stalk the herbivores. So just like with the carnivores, they might stick around areas where they've had a good meal. Well, the carnivores will do the same. But if they get too close, then the herbivores are going to run away. So there are genes that affect how close they get to the herbivores before they attack. And so I've seen it a few times where you see, like, you might have a random carnivore that actually is just stalking a big herd of herbivores, and at some point will decide to strike and jump in, and you get some quite complex behaviors, which I think is kind of interesting. Is like a big draw of it is to see this stuff happening, and then as you unlock the ability to design creatures yourself, so you can see these guys are doing it here, right? So this carnivore isn't hungry, but is keeping an eye on where these herbivores are. not getting too close, but not losing them. And then different herbivores have different, basically a distance between themselves and carnivores. So some herbivores might want to keep a huge distance when they see a threat, and others might not be so worried. So you can imagine how the genes of the herbivores kind of will interplay with the carnivores. So to get a real balance, you don't necessarily need like a super carnivore or a super herbivore. You want these kind of animals that balance with each other, rather than being like amazingly super. Because if you had like the super carnivore, they just eat everything and then die out. So yeah, so as I was saying, this thing here, the barrier, the reason this is here is because say you want to experiment, you've unlocked the ability to investigate the different genes and even change the genes yourself. You might want to block off an area with a force field and do some experiments on just make one set of carnivores in here, give them a certain genes and see how they behave. You might try and engineer some genetically modified plants. Here, these are seeds. I don't know if you spotted that. You might maybe be able to rewind, but you could just then. Some seeds came out. There, just came out top. You can see the little tiny white dots are the seeds. So they're actually flying through the wind. Like I said, there's a full wind model. If you listen, you can hear the wind is getting louder, which means that the wind is getting stronger. So yeah, so you would set this up, this fence, and then you could do experiments inside it. But I was talking to someone the other day about this, and we figured out, I pointed out something, is that you might set this area up and you might decide to have this genetically modify some plant, and you might go too far. There might be a plant that if it was out in the wild, it would just take over and colonize everything. Now, this fence, you can go over it. So if there was a sudden gust of wind, there's no reason why a seed couldn't go over there and then actually get into the rest of your world. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I want this game to be about, is about balancing and the difficulties with that, of how you balance this ecosystem. And it's also about experimenting, about discovering things. Something else that's going to be in these structures themselves are going to give off radiation, so you can see there's kind of this glow around them, and that radiation is going to actually mutate your animals, and that's how you'll get a genetic mutation. So that if you set one of these up, it's going to mean around the area of this this tower, you're going to get lots of diversity in your gene pool. So yeah, I don't know what's happened. We've still got carnivores somewhere. I can't really see them. But yeah, so that's kind of a basic overview of the whole game. Hopefully this gives you an idea if you'd be interested in it. If you are interested, you can follow me on Twitter. The details are in the description of this video, and follow me on YouTube, and I'll keep posting these whenever I've done a significant amount, if I've changed something significantly, so as I add new things. The main thing I'm going to be working on next actually is adding more kind of story and narrative elements. So I was saying about this company is going to be something you discover things about in the future. I'm going to program all that in there and think about maybe doing leaderboards, something like that, and thinking about like what is your aim in the game going to be. I've got some ideas, but I don't want to give some of the stuff away. So thanks for watching, and like I said, if you're interested, subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Twitter.